So class action lawsuits require what's known as certification. So even if a plaintiff succeeds in demonstrating standing and that they have stated a sufficient common law or statutory claim, they face an additional hurdle, which is called class certification. Why are class action suits filed versus, say, individual suits? Well, think about it. If I have a lawsuit that might result in $500 worth of harm, the remedy of $500 is not really rewarding to my attorneys because they're only going to get about a third of it, and the expenses of the lawsuit are going to probably exceed what we're going to get. On the other hand, if I have 100,000 other class members all getting $500, then that certainly covers the attorney's fees as well as the expenses much more comfortably and allows us to get all of the class members together rather and show some of these other points that we'll talk about shortly into the case rather than just me as an individual. Class actions typically begin with a small group of plaintiffs called class representatives, and they file the class action complaint on behalf of the entire class of affected individuals. A successful verdict on trial would be divided among all the members of the class, or if we decide to settle before we go to court, then the settlement is divided among the members of the class. But the plaintiffs can't automatically feel entitled to receive the damages or settle on behalf of the class. The class must be certified first before they can do that. It's easier to bring class action litigation into federal court, and because the plaintiffs must convince a judge that they satisfy Federal Rules of Civil Procedure 23. And 23 is divided into two parts. 23A, 23B. 23A has 4 prerequisites. There has to be numerosity. The class is so numerous that the joinder of all class members is impracticable. In other words, there's so many members that are represented by the class that to have them all come together at one trial would be impossible. The commonality, questions of law or fact are common to the entire class. We're filing negligence and breach of contract, and all members of the class would be filing that same cause of action. Typicality, the claims or defenses of the representative parties are typical of claims or defenses of the class. Inadequacy, the representative parties will fairly and adequately protect interests of the class. This generally involves are the attorneys experienced at class action lawsuits? Will they fairly ensure that the monies are distributed among the members of the class? Are the class representatives not in conflict of interest with the class itself, etc.? The biggest hurdle in this case is proving commonality. In the Walmart versus Dukes case, there was a massive lawsuit filed, massive class action lawsuit, representing 1.5 million female Walmart employees. The Supreme Court ruled that the 3 plaintiffs did not satisfy the commonality requirement. The case argued that Walmart's corporate culture and not a corporate policy led to the discrimination against female employees. So understand that there wasn't a corporate policy that said discriminate against women. It was the corporate culture. And local supervisors had discretion over pay and promotion. So it really, I guess what you could say is it wasn't Walmart that was discriminating. It was this corporate culture implemented by local supervisors that had discretion over pay and promotion that was the inequity. And this was not enough to demonstrate commonality Therefore, they couldn't go forward with the class action lawsuit. Class representatives must show that their case falls into one of four categories. This is the four categories of 23B. That separate claims would possibly create inconsistent or varying adjudications. In other words, if all 1.5 million female employees of Walmart filed individual claims against Walmart, there would be probably 1.5 million different adjudications of those claims. Some might be successful, some might be not. Some might get a lot of money, some might not. Separate claims would be dispositive of the interests of the other members not party to the individual adjudications and could impede their ability to protect their interest. Or the goal is declaratory or injunctive relief. We were filing an injunction to stop some type of action. And questions of law or fact common to class members predominate in class action is superior to other available methods of doing that. In Hannaford Brothers Company customer data security breach litigation, this is a putative class action lawsuit. Putative means reputed, believed, or supposed by most people. The class representatives brought 7 claims. 5 of those were dismissed, but look what went forward. Negligence and breach of contract were allowed to proceed. The district court concluded that the plaintiffs satisfied Rule 23A for numerosity. There were thousands of cardholders that purchased identity theft protection, and thousands were charged with replacement card fees. It was impossible to determine if Hannaford breach was the proximate cause of the expenses, but the court was permitted to draw reasonable inferences about that numerosity. So they felt numerosity was met. Commonality. The losses may vary by individual class members, but the claims arise from common question of whether Hannaford's actions caused the breach. Typicality. The class representatives and members of the class are aligned. They're demonstrating that Hannaford was negligent and the breach of an implied contract took place. Hannaford argued that an economic harm to the class members varied, which it probably did, but the judge determined that the varied actions by the class members was a mitigation to alleged actions of Hannaford itself. Inadequacy. In Hannaford case, the class representatives had to demonstrate that there was no potential conflict between the representatives and the class members. The lawyers were qualified and experienced and able to conduct the litigation, so adequacy was met. And the class representatives chose a lawsuit rather than accepting gift cards, but the judge ruled that this was not a conflict of interest in the case of the class representatives. Thus, all 4 prerequisites of the class were met under 23A, and it proceeded. In the Heartland Payment Systems case, customer data security breach litigation suffered a breach of 100 million customers' payment card data to hackers. A number of consumer lawsuits were filed across the nation. As I said, you usually don't see just one. In a data breach, you normally see multiple lawsuits filed against the company that was breached. The parties reached, this was all consolidated into one case in Texas, and the parties reached a settlement. The judge concluded that plaintiffs met all 4 requirements of Rule 23A, numerosity, 100 million member class. That's pretty numerous. The commonality, the common factual question was, what did Heartland do before, during, and after the breach to safeguard consumer plaintiffs' financial information? And typicality, the outcome of the claims centered on Heartland's conduct not any member. So it was on all of the individual members of the class. So it was a breach by Heartland that affected all of them. And adequacy, plaintiffs' lawyers are experienced and there are no conflicts with class representatives. Therefore, again, all the provisions of Part 23A were met and the settlement proceeded.